Welcome to the BioSalsa podcast, where we host community conversations on the biomedical industry in San Antonio. This $44 billion industry is the largest in San Antonio, the seventh largest city in the U.S. This podcast is brought to you by bioMedSA, a member-driven nonprofit with the mission to accelerate the growth of the healthcare and bioscience sector in San Antonio and the surrounding region. I'm Heather Hansen, president of bioMedSA. We'll explain more about bioMedSA and how you can access the biomedical ecosystem in San Antonio at the end of the podcast.
My name's Julianne Overton, and I'm the Director of Communications for bioAffinity Technologies, a biotech company here in San Antonio that develops non-invasive diagnostic tools for lung cancer and other lung diseases. Physicians order our CyPath Lung test for their patients at high risk for developing lung cancer. I'm here with our company's founder, president, and CEO, Maria Zanes. Maria, tell us a little bit about bioAffinity.
Of course. bioAffinity addresses the urgent need for non-invasive, for accurate early-stage cancer diagnosis, and also broad-spectrum cancer treatments. We're going to talk today, I think, about our test that now is in the market, which is called CyPath Lung. It is for the diagnosis, the early diagnosis of lung cancer. Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths, and the company's first product, CyPath Lung, improves early-stage detection of lung cancer. And it's really a test that can lead to increased survival, to fewer unnecessary invasive procedures when someone has a pulmonary nodule, presents with one after imaging, and it reduces patient anxiety. So we're looking at developing CyPath Lung. We have focused more immediately this year on the Texas market, but moving now into the national market. I should say, too, as we begin, that we were very pleased with a recent paper that came out that was published or that was authored by two pulmonologists, one at the VA and one at BAMC here at Brooke Army Medical Hospital, that showed that the use of CyPath Lung can significantly reduce the cost of healthcare for those who have a concern about lung cancer.
You know, I think when people hear about CyPath Lung, they're quite amazed at the game-changing aspect to it. Can you take us back in time a little bit and share sort of the origin story of CyPath Lung and bioAffinity Technologies?
Certainly. So CyPath Lung is unique. It uses flow cytometry, which is an instrument technology that allows us to look at the microenvironment of the lungs. The technology itself is used and has been used for some time in blood cancers. And by that, I mean what we look at is we look at different cell populations in blood for our blood cancers like leukemias. But with lung cancer, what we use flow cytometry for is with sputum, so with the phlegm that comes from the lung itself. So the uniqueness of this test is that it's not a molecular test. It's not looking at DNA or RNA or other molecular markers. It's actually looking at the cell populations that are in the lung and then finding those cell populations that are indicative of a malignancy. This work initially began with some work done at Los Alamos National Lab, New Mexico, which is actually where I'm from. And in New Mexico, at Los Alamos, they were looking at a certain compound, a certain molecule called a porphyrin that preferentially is taken up by cancer and cancer-related cells and has a beautiful red fluorescence. They were doing work initially on sputum to find cancer using microscopy. So looking at slides and looking for red fluorescing cells that indicate cancer cells are present. I came across this technology. I'm a businesswoman by training, also have a law degree, but found it very fascinating and decided that it was worth my time to see if we could develop this technology into something more. There was a clinical trial done in New Mexico on the slide-based system that used the porphyrin, and that came out well. It showed about 80% accuracy, but it also showed that we could improve the accuracy of this assay, of this test, and develop it commercially, but it would need work. And that's where I started to look at who and where we could do that kind of work. And we found indeed that in San Antonio, we had a home. We had the resources, we had the support, and certainly we had just a great city to help us.
Maria, I know that your decision to pursue this technology was not just based on business. There was a personal element as well. Do you mind sharing that?
No, I think that's very important because when you're building a company, when you're building anything, there has to be some passion and some reason behind it, because it can be difficult at times, right? So for me, my family was very much affected by cancer. My father died at the age of 39 of lung cancer. He was a World War II vet, highly decorated, but it was the cigarettes that got him. It was lung cancer and not the war that took his life. And then my brother Tom had early in his 30s been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He survived that for about 60 years, but he had recently been diagnosed with glioblastoma, with brain cancer, when I came across this technology. So for me, it was not only from a business standpoint made a tremendous amount of sense to pursue this, but from a personal standpoint, I think it was very important for me personally to see if I could take this to market. So it's been extraordinarily gratifying to see that the test now is commercial, that it's being adopted, that physicians are using it, that patients are being helped by CyPath Lung. And so it's an exciting time for us.
So you talked about Los Alamos National Lab using this particular porphyrin. We call it TCP. What do we call it, Maria? TCPP.
That's correct. That's the short name for it.
The short name for it. So tell me a little bit about how you and the science team took it from that slide-based, looking at a few cells on a slide through a microscope. How did we get from there to where we are doing this on a commercial level and able to process multiple tests per day?
So more than multiple tests, we really have the ability now to broaden, to enhance, and to increase the number of tests we get. Really, we have no end in sight as to how many tests a day we actually can run. But to go back a little bit of how we got to where we are now, where we have such capacity, we used a very established technology, as I said, which is flow cytometry. The unique part of using that is the use of sputum, of the phlegm, and which is an absolutely great sample, because if you think about it, that which is in our lungs is around, if there's malignancy, if there's a tumor, those cells are going to be sloughed off. What we also found was that in addition to having the cell population that took up that porphyrin, we found other populations that indicated malignancy was there. One is a population of cells that are dying. And if you think about it biologically, it makes sense that indeed, if the lung is fighting off a cancer, you're going to have more of a battle, you're going to have more dead cells. And we also found a population of cells that are upregulated, that are from that are immune cells, and that all came into the equation, to the algorithm that we built. I think what is unique to CyPath is that we developed through AI, through machine learning, an algorithm that very quickly, in literally a matter of minutes, takes the data that we get from flow cytometry and is able to tell you whether you are at really yes or no answer, but it's given the answer to the physician is whether this person has is at low risk or is at high risk for having cancer. And this patient report is used by a physician to determine next steps in care. It may be good, Julianne, if we could step back and talk about who uses this test?
Right.
How is the test used, right?
Right.
So a good idea to, if you think about it, is you don't want to test, and we don't screen or we don't diagnose everyone. We actually have a group of individuals who are considered at high risk for lung cancer, and those are primarily smokers, either former or current smokers. And even so, their incident rate, the percentage of people within this group that are at high risk is only 1 to 3 or 4% of the people actually have lung cancer. So if, for example, you have an imaging, you have a low dose CT, which I strongly recommend people who are at high risk for lung cancer get, which is just a CT scan, and it shows a pulmonary nodule. It shows something, we used to call it a spot in the lung. But it shows something that is of a concern because of its size or the way it presents to a physician. Even so, if it's then called in screening a positive screen, only 4 or 5 out of 100 people who receive that positive screen actually have lung cancer. So think about it. It's very important to get screened, but often there's just false discovery. There's not everyone who sees something that is suspicious is indeed actually has lung cancer. So we need a secondary test. We need additional, most physicians will then say a number of things. One is, this is a nodule that is big enough or presents such that we want to go into biopsy immediately. Or most often they say we're going to follow, or we're going to do an additional test like a bronchoscopy or PET CT or further diagnosis. What CyPath Lung adds to this pathway is just more certainty for the physician and for the patient. And the beauty of the test is that it's a non-invasive test. So individuals who use CyPath Lung collect their sample at home, and they do it over 3 days. We have a patient coach who helps. We have some great videos that help, and most often, certainly, especially our smokers and former smokers can produce that phlegm, can produce that sputum, and then they just overnight it to the lab. They do it at home, they send it to the lab, and 2 or 3 days later, they have their result. Most often it's within 48 hours, but often it takes the 3rd day. But certainly they have a result that then can be acted upon by the physician and their patient as to determine what's next.
So what kind of information goes back to the physician from the CyPath test?
They get a very simple report that says whether the patient is at very low risk or they are not at risk for lung cancer, or that there's a risk or a very high risk. So it's really a yes/no answer for them, but it also gives them a scale, the physician and the patient, as to where the patient falls within that scale. It is not the firm diagnosis. And I want to make clear, for a firm diagnosis of lung cancer, you really do need a biopsy, you need tissue. But this is a test that helps direct those many people who get a positive or a suspicious or a nodule that a physician wants to watch to say, okay, what do I do next? I mentioned earlier that we did, we had the economic paper. The paper itself looked at the people who had suspicious nodules, who we call them indeterminate nodules, during 2022. And it assumed in this model, in this economic model, that CyPath Lung was used. And when it did, when we brought CyPath Lung into the picture, into the pathway, it was found that on an individual basis, and people on Medicare would save about $2,700 per person in 2022, or more than $350 million to the system. And of course, when we look and we assume that these individuals had private pay insurance, we more than doubled the amount of savings for the population. So CyPath Lung can make a lot of difference for individuals, not only for their own peace of mind, but also for moving forward and knowing what next steps are, and within the healthcare system and our pocketbook.
So you bring up another good point too, Maria, for our very many fellow San Antonians who are veterans. We recently got some good news from the VA, which will be very beneficial to veterans who are at higher risk for developing lung cancer. Tell us a little bit about that.
So our veteran population is very, very important to us and very dear to my heart, as I said about my father being a veteran, but in addition to which, the very first trial that was done on this technology in New Mexico was done with our New Mexico veterans. So, and we will be looking at doing additional research, and we're working with our veterans, with the Audie Murphy here in San Antonio and across the country. So indeed, that's very important. We heard, we were awarded, and our laboratory, Precision Pathology Laboratory Services, which is a subsidiary of bioAffinity Technologies, was awarded the ability to sell, to offer, I should say, CyPath Lung throughout the country to all of our VAs. So it's now reimbursed by the VA to us. It's available without cost to the patient to any of our veterans. And so I urge them to talk more to us. They're welcome to learn more from us about CyPath Lung, but also their physicians about CyPath Lung.
We're getting close to the end of our time, so I wanted to very quickly get in, talk about results from our clinical trial. How accurate is this test?
So that's a very good point. And we did a trial where we found, particularly with small nodules, nodules less than 20 millimeters or 2 centimeters, that the test had 92% sensitivity, meaning it 92% of the time was accurate in its ability to find the cancer and to call cancer where it stood. And then it was 87% accurate in telling someone that they did not have cancer. Indeed, that lesion, that nodule was not cancer. I emphasize the balanced nature of this test because it's basically 90% of the time we're correct, either in that you don't have cancer or you do have cancer. This is important. Every test, no test, I should say, is 100% accurate. Even biopsies are closer to what a 90% accuracy. So having additional tests, having not just one test, but having several of them, can help a physician hone in on and be most accurate in determining the diagnosis of a person.
So very briefly, let's close out. Tell me about some of the feedback we're getting from physicians and maybe from patients as well.
Both physicians and patients are doing are very pleased, I think, with the test itself. We are a publicly traded company. I should have said so at the very beginning. And so we file with the Security and Exchange Commission every quarter, and people can certainly see. But you know, our second quarter orders were up more than 200% over our first quarter orders, for example. We've seen every single quarter, every single month, we see an increase in the number of tests ordered and the number of physician offices getting onboarded, meaning being able to order and use the test. And certainly the award from the VA to offer our test is a great, really push forward for us. And we see that as, especially as quickly as we were awarded the listing on what's called the Federal Supply Schedule. We saw it as certainly an indication of the need and the acceptance of the test. And I'll close out, if I could, with just one thing. Our symbol is BIAF, and we are trading on the NASDAQ.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the time, Maria.
Thank you.
bioMed-SA accomplishes its mission by supporting the companies and organizations already here, catalyzing actions for growth that benefit the entire community, and promoting the region and its assets. If you are seeking connections to resources or want to increase your company's visibility in this market, bioMed-SA can help. To learn more about bioMed-SA, the life sciences in the San Antonio region, or to access additional podcasts, visit biomedsa.org.